Go. We're out of here.
KPFA, KPFB Berkeley 88.1, KFCF in Fresno.
Good evening. It's Monday, September 28th. Firefighters battling yet another destructive wind-whipped wildfire in Northern California's Napa and Sonoma counties. Overnight, the glass fire explodes in Napa County, tripling in size and moving to the west into Sonoma County and into the eastern part of the city of Santa Rosa. As the nation grapples with massive wildfires, a hurricane season already on its second alphabet, and intensifying drought, environmentalists demand moderators for tomorrow's first presidential debate to press the candidates for their plans to address global warming. A bombshell New York Times report reveals that President Trump paid just $750 in federal income taxes the year he ran for office and paid no federal income taxes at all in many other years. Trump announces plans to distribute rapid coronavirus tests to help protect nursing homes and speed up the reopening of schools and businesses. And California Governor Gavin Newsom signs legislation aimed at holding accountable the private profit-making companies that run detention centers for undocumented immigrants. The legislation is the first of its kind in the nation. From Pacifica Radio, KPFA Berkeley, KPFK Los Angeles, this is the Evening News. I'm Mark Miracle. Northern California's wine country is on fire again as strong winds fanned flames in the already scorched region, destroying homes and prompting overnight evacuation orders for more than 50,000 people. The fires that began Sunday in the famed Napa-Sonoma wine country, about 45 miles north of San Francisco, came as the region nears the third anniversary of deadly wildfires that erupted in 2017, including one that killed 22 people. Just a month ago, many of the same residents were evacuated from the path of a lightning-sparked fire that became the fourth largest in state history. More than 53,000 people in Sonoma and Napa counties have been evacuated in the latest inferno, one of 27 major fire clusters burning across the state. Pacific Gas and Electric is inspecting its equipment as it seeks to restore power to more than 100,000 customers who had it turned off in advance of the gusty winds and in areas with active fire zones. The utility's equipment has caused previous disasters, including the 2018 Camp Fire that killed 85 people and devastated the town of Paradise in the Sierra Nevada foothills. Evacuations have also been ordered in Shasta County as the Zog Fire spread over 23 square miles. Residents are widely scattered in the forested area in the northern part of the state. The region was torched just 2 years ago by the deadly Carr Fire, infamously remembered for producing a huge tornado-like fire whirl. The causes of the new fires under investigation. Scott Baba reports.
Fire officials say the glass fire, which broke out in Napa County early Sunday morning, has exploded with a dangerous rate of spread. In his weekly address, California Governor Gavin Newsom said that weather conditions were making fighting the fire particularly difficult.
The glass fire grew substantially overnight, roughly 800 acres to 11,000 acres. A substantial number of structures have been damaged, wineries and other structures in and around the area. Familiar evacuation orders and challenge right now that's been made more acute because of overnight winds. Those winds will maintain themselves. They'll begin to dissipate later in the afternoon, stabilize overnight, which should help with our efforts to take advantage of those conditions and move to advance our containment efforts.
The fire is currently 0% contained. Fire crews from across the Bay Area are assisting with the blaze. It began just north of the town of St. Helena around 4 a.m. Sunday morning. Around 7:30 p.m. Sunday evening, 2 other blazes had been reported west of St. Helena, the Shady and Boysen fires. They have since joined the Glass Fire. The fire started during a dry heat wave and a red flag warning, which signals high fire danger due to high wind and low humidity. Those conditions overnight fueled the blaze, which now threatens Calistoga, Angwin, and Santa Rosa. As of Monday afternoon, an estimated 60,000 residents have been forced to evacuate their homes. That includes 35,000 people from Santa Rosa, where the fire has reportedly destroyed multiple homes. Santa Rosa is still recovering from the deadly Tubbs fire of 2017. The Glass Fire has reportedly damaged several well-known wineries and vineyards, such as the Chateau Boswell Winery in St. Helena and the Tofanelli Vineyards in Calistoga. Another 15,000 people in the path of the fire are under evacuation warning. That means they have not been told to leave yet, but should be ready to leave if ordered. CAL FIRE spokesperson Lynn Tomachoff said that at this point, the priority was getting people to safety.
Firefighters are trying their best to make progress. Unfortunately, once again, as they were years ago, these fires are being fanned by the extreme wind conditions that we're experiencing. Once a fire starts under these conditions, they tend to spread very quickly, very rapidly, and they're very hard to control. We just try our best to get ahead of it, keep people safe, and then work on getting the fire out.
A number of evacuation centers have been set up, including ones at Sonoma Raceway, the Sonoma Marin Fairgrounds, and the Petaluma Veterans Building. CAL FIRE spokesperson Tyree Zander said that residents in at-risk areas should take evacuation orders seriously.
Sign up for the Nixle alerts so that way you get alerts of when your area can go into evacuation warning or an evacuation order. And then also have a go bag ready and in your vehicle. So that way, if you are put into an evacuation order, you aren't delaying your ability to get out of the area in a safe manner. As well as with your family and friends, try to have an escape plan and a meeting spot if you're not in the same location for pre-planning when it comes to emergency incidents.
There are currently 27 major active fires burning across the state. So far this year, more than 8,000 California wildfires have scorched a record 5,600 square miles, destroyed more than 7,000 buildings, and have killed 26 people. Governor Newsom said that these major fires are the new normal in California, and his office is looking for long-term ways to mitigate the danger.
We're not standing still. We're not just victims of fate. We want to shape this future. We want to work on suppression, work on prevention, and then work on adaptation and strategies that are longer term as it relates to decarbonizing our economy.
Because of smoke from the Glass Fire, a Sunday Spare the Air alert for the Bay Area was extended through Monday and was additionally extended through Friday for Napa and Sonoma counties. According to the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, residents in low-quality air zones should stay indoors and avoid unnecessary physical activity.
And that's Scott Baba reporting. A CAL FIRE briefing held later this afternoon after Governor Gavin Newsom spoke found that the Glass Fire has now destroyed 36,200 acres. It's more than tripled in size. It broke out before 4 a.m. in the morning. It merged with 2 other fires. Officials still do not have an estimate on the number of homes destroyed or burned, but in addition to the Chateau Boswell Winery in St. Helena, it's burnt at least one 5-star resort. Karen Argood reports.
Last night, flames from the fast-moving Glass Fire jumped over hills and across both the Silverado Trail and Lodi River, despite fire crews' massive efforts to contain it yesterday. Napa County Emergency Public Information Officer Janet Upton says overnight the fire exploded in acreage and crossed Highway 29.
The new starts actually ended up burning together, and the whole entire fire is now being considered one fire, the Glass Fire. It's been zoned in east and west zones on either side of the north end of the Napa Valley.
Upton says that's done so that firefighters can have a span of control and more readily share resources between locations of the fire.
what also occurred last night is the fire blew across the Mayacamas mountain range into Sonoma County, down towards Highway 12 in the community of Oakmont.
Upton says not only have the winds been a factor, but critically dry relative humidity can add up to extreme fire behavior. And when you combine that with high winds, firefighters had a big challenge on their hands, not to mention the extreme heat, which puts extra strain on the men and women, many of whom have been fighting the fire for 30-plus hours. A CAL FIRE damage inspection team is on the ground starting today examining structure damage. A detailed report is expected later this evening. CAL FIRE Public Information Officer Tyree Zander says this fire moved so fast it caught the agency understaffed and they were unable to get this morning's update out.
The fact that you start an incident within a 24-hour period, it takes time to build the incident command and get the resources in from other parts of the state. We didn't have our staffing number yet because of the fact that it's so early in the incident that people are still on their way. And with all the major fires going throughout the state, it takes time to get those resources in that are available.
Napa County evacuation warning and order zones have affected over 11,000 residents. Just over 400 evacuees have taken refuge at the Napa Crosswalk Community Church shelter. And for many of them, this is the second and third time. There are some residents who choose not to evacuate but have not prepared. And then there are those who have, like Bob Bolin, winemaker at Bremer Family Winery. Bolin says he built his home in Angwin in 2009 to withstand the threat of wildfires. Bolin is also an engineer and an environmentalist with an impressive knowledge of fire prevention and home safety.
We built the home with the fact that wildfires are a reality in this area. And so we tried to design it where it was no home is fireproof, obviously, but we tried to make it as fire resistant as possible. We built the home with stucco siding and a metal roof, and then we designed the roof with no vents, so there's no attic space. I keep my rain gutters clear. It's the type of situation where if embers fall on the house, it's not going to start a fire. And then I try to keep vegetation trimmed far enough away from the house that if any vegetation on the property catches fire, it's not going to impact the house as well. We also put in every piece of equipment we would need to fight a fire, including, backup power and a booster pump and fire hose and all that, so that we could fight a fire if it came our way. And I think if you're going to live in wildfire country, everybody should have a bunker. I grew up in Kansas, and everybody had a storm cellar because it was tornado country. And I think if you are going to stay and try to protect your home, then you need to have a bunker.
Bolin and his wife, Kathy, were given mandatory evacuation orders yesterday, but they chose to stay and sat up outside their home and kept watch.
The reason we did that was I didn't want to sleep through the fire. I didn't want to be in my bedroom and have the fire sneak up on me, so I wanted to hear it coming or smell it. These fires make a lot of noise. I could hear little explosions throughout the night every time. I don't know, it could be like a propane tank or something like that. Those are bigger explosions. But even when a pine tree catches fire, it makes noise. And so I was hearing that, and I was hearing it approaching. But that's why we slept outside or tried to sleep. I think I may have gotten 15 minutes sleep last night.
Bolin says the glass fire came within a half a mile to their home.
There's, I don't know, I would say the flames, I would say they were about 30 feet tall. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to judge at night. It was scary.
Bolin's wife left this morning to stay with family, so Bob is on his own. Friends can't get up there to help him at this point, but he's not crazy. He's made a choice to stay and save his home, and he says he's prepared. For those wanting to see continued briefings and updates on the glass fire, follow CAL FIRE LNU on Facebook. For Pacifica Radio, KPFA, I'm Karen Argood.
Several counties in the San Francisco Bay Area have set up locations as cooling centers during this heat wave and for wildfire smoke relief during these fires. You can find a list of them on the front page of KPFA's website. That's at kpfa.org. Information about cooling centers and smoke relief places in the Bay Area on KPFA's website at kpfa.org. And you are listening to the evening news on KPFA in Berkeley, KPFK in Los Angeles, KFCF Fresno, online at kpfa.org. As the nation grapples with massive wildfires, a hurricane season already on its second alphabet, and intensifying drought, environmentalists, climate activists are calling on moderators for tomorrow's first presidential debate to press the candidates for their plans to address global warming. Eric Galatis has the story.
In 2016, just one question referenced climate change during a town hall event, and Colin O'Mara with the National Wildlife Federation says this year's moderators need to chart a different course.
To not have a question is just the height of irresponsibility. We think that every American has a right to know what the candidates' positions are on these incredibly important issues that are affecting, millions of their neighbors across the country.
O'Mara and others want USA Today's Susan Page, C-SPAN's Steve Scully, Fox News' Chris Wallace, and NBC News' Kristen Welker to ask President Donald Trump and Vice President Joe Biden for their plans to reduce emissions in electricity generation, in the transportation sector, in agriculture, and restoring lands to capture and sequester more carbon. The world's top scientists have warned that less than a decade remains to sharply curtail fossil fuel emissions to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. O'Mara says the next president will be charged with leading the nation out of the biggest financial downturn since the Great Depression, and addressing climate change full steam could create good-paying jobs in every community across the nation.
That's the opportunity to clean up existing sources of energy. It's the opportunity to deploy clean energy sources, to transform the transportation sector. We could create 10 to 12 million clean energy and kind of climate-related technology jobs.
O'Mara says the presidential and vice presidential debates don't have to be just a spectator sport. He's encouraging Americans who have been impacted by climate change to reach out to the networks and to remind journalists on their Facebook and Twitter pages to make sure climate change is part of this year's national conversation. For Public News Service, I'm Eric Galatis.
According to Florida police and campaign officials, President Donald Trump's former campaign manager, Brad Parscale, was hospitalized after he threatened to harm himself. Police officers talked Parscale out of his Fort Lauderdale home after his wife called police to say that he had multiple firearms and was threatening to hurt himself when he was hospitalized Sunday under the state's Baker Act. That allows anyone deemed to be a threat to themselves or others to be detained for 72 hours for psychiatric evaluation. Parscale was demoted from the campaign manager's post in July, but remained part of the campaign, helping run its digital operation. Standing 6'8" and with a distinctive beard, Parscale had become a celebrity to Trump supporters. He'd frequently pose for photos and sign autographs ahead of campaign rallies. But Trump had begun to sour on him earlier this year as Parscale attracted a wave of media attention that included focus on his seemingly glitzy lifestyle on the Florida coast that kept him far from campaign headquarters in Virginia. Over the summer, he hyped 1 million ticket requests for the president's comeback rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that ended up drawing just 6,000 people. A furious Trump was left staring at a sea of empty seats and, weeks later, promoted Bill Stepien to campaign manager. Simon Marks reports.
Brad Parscale, President Trump's recently sidelined re-election campaign manager, had to be pinned to the ground last night by police in Florida after barricading himself in his home and threatening to commit suicide. Mr. Parscale is facing questions about financial irregularities in the Trump re-election campaign, and he's a central figure in a British TV investigation into allegations that the 2016 campaign deliberately suppressed black votes. He's now in hospital under a mental health order. Simon Marks, Washington.
Revelations that President Donald Trump is personally liable for more than $400 million in debt, casting a shadow over his presidency that ethics experts say raises national security concerns that he could be manipulated to sway U.S. policy by organizations or individuals he's indebted to. New scrutiny of Trump, who claims great success as a private businessman, comes after the New York Times reported that tax records show he's personally carrying a staggering amount of debt, including more than $300 million in loans that will come due in the next 4 years. Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts was blunt about the potential implications, saying he may be vulnerable to financial blackmail from a hostile foreign power and God knows what else. The Times said the tax records also show that Trump did not pay any federal income taxes in 11 years between 2000 and 2018, raising questions about the fairness of a president who purports to be a billionaire, paying less in taxes than most Americans. He paid just $750 in federal income tax in 2016 when he won the presidency, in 2017 when he took over the White House. Lily Bolke has more.
The New York Times reports that Trump's facing a 10-year legal battle with the IRS over a $72.9 million tax refund he received. Reviewing decades worth of records, the Times concludes the president paid no income tax at all in 10 of the 15 years before he took office, and less than $1,000 each in 2016 and 17, with deep and chronic losses and massive debt coming due. Trump refutes the information.
We've been negotiating for a long time. Things get settled, like in the IRS. But right now, when you're under audit, you don't do it. You don't do that.
That's President Trump explaining why he's still refusing to disclose his tax returns. From Pacifica Network and Public News Service, I'm Lily Bolke.
The report on Trump's taxes comes just 2 days before the presidential debate and weeks before the presidential election. The Times report also shows that Trump has financed an extravagant lifestyle with the use of business expenses, and that lobbyists and foreign visitors have helped support Trump's properties. Since 2015, his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida has taken in $5 million more a year from a surge in membership. The Billy Graham Evangelistic Association spent at least $397,000 in 2017 at Trump's Washington Hotel. Overseas projects have produced millions more for Trump. $3 million from the Philippines, $2.3 million from India, $1 million from Turkey. In all three countries, Trump has paid substantially more income taxes than he has to the U.S. Treasury. Trump will face financial pressure as debts come due. He seems sure to face heavy financial pressures from the enormous pile of debt he's absorbed. The Times said the president appears to be responsible for $421 million in loans, most of which will come due within 4 years. On top of that, a $100 million mortgage on Trump Tower in New York comes due in 2022. Some reactions to the revelations about Trump and his income and his taxes. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, shock of shocks, Donald Trump, the self-proclaimed billionaire, received a $72.9 million tax refund from the IRS while not paying a nickel in federal income taxes in 10 out of 15 years. Yep, Trump loves corporate socialism for himself, rugged capitalism for everyone else, Sanders said. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, this is about more than one man's personal tax scams. Donald Trump is a liar, a cheater, and a crooked businessman, yes, but he's also taking advantage of a broken, corrupt, and unequal system that's built for people like him to do what he did. East Bay Congressman Eric Swalwell, he's broke and facing criminal charges. That's why Donald Trump is sabotaging the mail, welcoming foreign interference, and inciting violence to win an election. The immigrant rights groups, Raíces, turns out our undocumented sister and brothers pay more taxes than the President of the United States. And a teenager. I am a 16-year-old part-time minimum wage worker, and I pay more income taxes than the billionaire president of the United States. Republican Senate Judiciary Committee Chair Lindsey Graham says the confirmation hearing for President Trump's Supreme Court nominee, Amy Coney Barrett will begin on October 12th. Trump is vowing she will be confirmed very quickly. No justice has ever been confirmed to the Supreme Court so close to a presidential election, with early voting in the election already underway in some states. The number 2 Senate Democrat Dick Durbin of Illinois said Democrats can slow the confirmation down by a matter of hours or perhaps days, but can't stop the outcome. If confirmed, Barrett's addition would make for the sharpest ideological swing on the Supreme Court since Clarence Thomas replaced Justice Thurgood Marshall nearly 3 decades ago. In a memo to colleagues, Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer warned of the GOP's monomaniacal drive to confirm Coney Barrett. Schumer told Senate Democrats, "Our number one job is to communicate exactly what is at stake for the American people if Republicans jam through this nominee. The elimination of the Affordable Care Act is at the top of the list. That's Obamacare." Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden echoed that concern.
There's no mystery about what's happening here. President Trump is trying to throw out the Affordable Care Act, and he's been trying to do it for the last 4 years.
The U.S. Supreme Court is set to hear a case on overturning the Affordable Care Act about a week after the election. Biden urged the Republican-led Senate to hold off on voting on Coney Barrett's nomination until after the November 3rd presidential election to let the people decide, which is the same argument Republicans used in refusing to consider President Obama's Supreme Court nominee, Merrick Garland, 4 years ago. Democratic vice presidential nominee, California Senator Kamala Harris, today warned during a campaign stop in North Carolina that the Affordable Care Act is at stake in the upcoming fight over President Trump's pick to replace the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the Supreme Court. Max Pringle reports.
Harris also criticized Trump and the Republican-led Senate's decision to ignore Ginsburg's final wish, dictated to her granddaughter, that her seat be left open until voters weigh in November 3rd.
Already the president and his party have chosen to ignore Justice Ginsburg's final wish to hold off the nomination to replace her until after the next president is chosen. A wish, by the way, shared by the American people.
The Trump administration is waging a legal fight to scrap the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. The Supreme Court is slated to hear arguments on the matter on November 10th.
President Trump and his party have made it clear they will pick a justice who will get rid of the Affordable Care Act.
Harris says overturning President Obama's signature piece of legislation could impact millions of Americans.
It's a decision that could take away health care for 20 million Americans. It is a decision that could take away protections for pre-existing conditions for more than 100 million people in our country.
Some experts have argued that it's unclear how Judge Amy Coney Barrett would rule on a challenge to Obamacare. Nicholas Bagley is a University of Michigan law professor. He's argued that the suit due before the High Court in November is significantly weaker than a past challenge to the ACA. But Harris argues that overturning the ACA could negatively impact health care for seniors and young people alike.
It's a decision that could take away Medicare benefits for seniors. It's a decision that could toss out the rule that says children can be covered on their parents' health care up to the age of 26.
The California Democrat also warned of dire consequences for women's health should the ACA disappear.
Getting rid of the Affordable Care Act will take us backward to a time where you could charge a woman more for her health care than you can charge a man just because she's a woman. Getting rid of the Affordable Care Act will take us backward to a time when pregnancy could be considered a pre-existing condition.
The Senate is due to take up the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett on October 12th.
And that's Max Pringle reporting. And you're listening to the evening news on KPFA Berkeley, KPFK Los Angeles, KFCF Fresno, online at kpfa.org. It's an hour-long newscast. Airs each night at 6 with a half-hour edition on the weekends. And you can hear any newscast online whenever you like. It's archived at kpfa.org. And we are entering the second week of the fund drive here at KPFA. We need to raise $450,000 to get this station through the rest of the year financially. Psychically, I don't know. Even if we've got the money, we'll make it to the end of the year. But we'll at least have the material in hand to spiritually try to get there. We'll have the material base. 1-800-439-5732 is the phone number that you call to help with our material base or our financial need. Or you can do it online at kpfa.org, 1-800-439-5732, online at kpfa.org. We are supposed to raise some $2,500 towards the fund drive here tonight during the newscast. If you're a regular listener to this newscast and you are not a financial supporter of KPFA, a subscriber, sometimes we call it, a listener sponsor, sometimes we call it. At any rate, if you haven't given us any money, but you listen to the news, I seriously ask you tonight to consider how much you can support us with at 1-800-439-5732 or online at kpfa.org. We have a $2,500 goal by the end of the newscast. We're halfway through the newscast, and we are zero of the way towards our goal. 1-800-439-5732. If you believe that the news and information that is available on this station is unique and not available elsewhere, if you believe it is a service to yourself, your family, your community, your fellow colleagues, your fellow citizens, a service to the state and the nation, help us keep doing the job at 1-800-439-5732 or kpfa.org. Now, I'm going to give the phone number one more time and then return to the news. 1-800-439-5732. Help us out, or online at kpfa.org. President Donald Trump today announced plans to distribute rapid coronavirus tests to help protect nursing homes and speed up the reopening of schools and businesses. Trump had announced the purchase of 150 million rapid coronavirus tests last month. Christopher Martinez reports.
President Donald Trump has taken fierce criticism for his handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in particular for troubles ramping up testing. A day before the first presidential candidates debate, Trump spoke at the White House Rose Garden to make an announcement on coronavirus tests.
Today I'm pleased to report that we're announcing our plan to distribute 150 million Abbott rapid point-of-care tests in the coming weeks, very, very soon.
Those 150 million tests are not exactly new. Trump announced the purchase of the tests last month during the Republican National Convention. The tests are different from the molecular tests, known as reverse transcription polymerase chain reaction tests, that are the gold standard for confirming coronavirus cases. The point-of-care tests are less accurate, but they're much cheaper, give results more quickly, and do not require a lab.
In the old days when we just started this, you remember we'd go out and we'd have to find these massive laboratories with tremendously expensive equipment. Now we're down to something that you'll see that is really from a different planet.
According to the announcement, about 50 million tests will be sent to nursing homes and assisted living facilities. As for the rest of the tests,
100 million rapid point-of-care tests will be given to states and territories to support efforts to reopen their economies and schools immediately and fast as they can.
Trump has made reopening schools and the economy a top priority.
And lockdowns can be very harmful. And we have too many states that are locked down right now. The governors are. Nobody knows what the governors are doing, actually.
Trump has repeatedly made controversial statements about testing, such as claiming that everyone who wants a test can get one, or suggesting that testing should be slowed down because when you do more tests, you find more cases, which is actually the point of testing. Perhaps with that in mind, Trump set the stage for the results of more testing.
And it's important to remember that as younger and healthier people return to work, and as we massively increase testing capacity, we will identify more cases and asymptomatic individuals in low-risk populations. This should not cause undue alarm. The total number of cases is not the full metric of success. Hospitalization capacity and mortality rates are far more instructive metrics. As we do more tests, you're going to have automatically more cases.
Vice President Mike Pence joined Trump for the announcement and gave a similar warning.
Mr. President, the American people should anticipate that cases will rise in the days ahead.
Many public health experts are worried about a surge in cases as numbers rise in many states, especially in the Midwest. But Trump remains optimistic as ever.
I say it, and I'll say it all the time, we're rounding the corner.
Some experts have a less rosy view. The nation's top infectious disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, commented on rising case numbers Monday, saying, "We're not in a good place." Fauci was not present for Trump's announcement, but Trump's controversial new advisor, Dr. Scott Atlas, was. And unlike Fauci, he seems to share Trump's optimism.
There really should be, as I've said many times, the fear is not the issue here. We really have a handle on what's going on. We know what to anticipate, and there's remarkable advances being made as we see today.
On a related matter, Trump gave his optimistic prediction for the availability of a coronavirus vaccine.
Over 100 million doses will be available before the end of the year. We will defeat the virus and we will end the pandemic. And next year will be one of the greatest years in our history, and we think it's going to be a very exciting period of time.
Meanwhile, as the U.S. gets ready to distribute 150 million of the new rapid tests, others are also moving forward. The World Health Organization has announced it will distribute 120 million rapid tests to low and middle income countries to help them track and control COVID infections. Reporting for Pacifica Radio News KPFA, I'm Christopher Martinez.
Governor Gavin Newsom said today that California is showing signs of a new surge of coronavirus cases, warning of a potential third shutdown of businesses and more delays in school reopenings if we're not vigilant. Coronavirus-related hospitalizations have fallen more than 20% in the past 2 weeks, and just 2.8% of the people tested each day in California were positive for the disease, the lowest rate since the pandemic began. The improving numbers have prompted state officials to loosen restrictions in 13 more counties over the last few weeks, allowing more businesses to reopen, while granting hundreds of waivers for elementary schools, mostly private, to resume in-person classes. But the reproduction number, a measure of how quickly the virus is spreading, is creeping up in the state's most populated areas. An R number greater than 1.0 indicates an infected person is spreading the disease to more than one other person, which translates into an increasing case rate. In the 9-county San Francisco Bay Area, the number increased to 0.95 in the first 2 weeks of September, and in the lower portion of Southern California, which includes Orange, San Diego, San Bernardino, Riverside, and Imperial counties, the R number rose to 0.97. Dr. Jeffrey Klausner, a professor in the Division of Infectious Diseases at the University of California, Los Angeles, said that the reproduction number is fraught with uncertainty because it's an estimate based on a model that includes many factors. Klausner said we have to be cautious and not overinterpret it. But Governor Newsom warned if we go back to our original form, if we're not cautious, if we're not vigilant, if we're not wearing our masks, not practicing social distancing, physical distancing, and hand washing and hygiene, the numbers can start to tick back up. India's confirmed coronavirus tally has reached 6 million, with the country second only to the United States in the number of reported cases. The health ministry reported more than 82,000 new coronavirus cases today and more than 1,000 deaths. New infections in India are currently being reported faster than anywhere else in the world. It's expected to become the pandemic's worst-hit country in the coming weeks, surpassing the U.S., where more than 7 million infections have been reported. Ishan Garg reports from New Delhi.
Despite the rising cases, authorities may allow more businesses to resume functioning. Cinema halls and amusement parks, which have been shut since March, could reopen. Tourist destinations across the country are expected to welcome visitors again. The government says it wants to bring activity back to pre-COVID levels after the country reported its worst ever GDP figures last month. Experts say the government needs to impose another lockdown, but authorities argue that India's recovery rate is decent and the death rate low, which is why people must now learn to live with the virus. Ishan Garg, New Delhi.
French President Emmanuel Macron has justified new restrictions in the country to limit the spread of the virus, as restaurant and bar owners forced to shut down expressed anger at the measures. Macron said the virus situation in French big cities is serious and worrying. New restrictions will focus on areas where health authorities report a rapid and significant spreading of the epidemic. Bars and restaurants in Marseille, France's second biggest city, closed on Sunday evening for at least a week, prompting demonstrations against the government order. Milder restrictions have been ordered in 10 other cities, including Paris, with gyms shut down, public gatherings of more than 10 people banned, and bars ordered to close at 10 p.m. French authorities have reported a steady increase in new infections and hospitalizations in recent weeks. The country has reported a total of more than 31,700 virus-related deaths, one of Europe's highest tolls. The French finance minister, meanwhile, promised business owners to stand by their sides and to keep deploying resources to help them survive the extraordinarily difficult moment. Russ Colin reports from Paris.
Finance Minister set out a $100 billion stimulus plan for the next two-year economic cycle. Bruno Le Maire says there'll be a €10 billion cut in production taxes from January the 1st next year as the government tries to shore up the French economy and pull it out of one of the deepest recessions in Europe brought on by the effects of the pandemic, all while the country suffers a surge in the number of new coronavirus infections. Ross Cullen, Paris.
You are listening to the evening news in KPFA Berkeley, KPFK Los Angeles, KFCF Fresno, online at kpfa.org.
Donald Trump and Joe Biden face off head-to-head for their first presidential debate this Tuesday night, starting at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Pacifica Radio will have it live right here on this radio station. I'm Mitch Jeserich. I'll be hosting our debate coverage, including our post show, in which we'll have an entire list of guests to provide analysis, and we'll also take your phone calls. So that's the presidential debate Tuesday night, September 29th, starting at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, right here on this radio station.
And that coverage will be preempting the evening news tomorrow. No evening news at 6 o'clock tomorrow because of the presidential debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, and Pacifica Radio's coverage of it, hosted by Mitch Jeserich. 1-800-439-5732. We have a long way to go to reach our goal of raising $2,500 here as we kick off week number 2 of the fund drive here at KPFA. There are hopes that we would be able to end this fund drive early, not have to go into week 3. I don't know at the rate we're doing tonight. That's a pretty slim hope right now, but there's always hope especially where there's money. 1-800-439-5732 or online at kpfa.org. KPFA.org to give us some hope, to give us some money. 1-800-439-5732. Hope and money at KPFA.org. Please do what you can. Help keep this radio station on the air. Help keep this kind of information free flowing over the airwaves. 1-800-439-5732, KPFA.org. Federal judge in Philadelphia joined others today in ordering a halt to recent Postal Service cuts that critics say are causing mail delays and threatening the integrity of the presidential election. The judge found that 6 states in the District of Columbia presented compelling evidence from the U.S. Postal Service itself that shows a pronounced increase in mail delays across the country since July. U.S. District Judge Gerald McHugh wrote in granting a preliminary injunction that in a pandemic, states are even more reliant on the mail, especially when it comes to administering elections. The Postal Service, in response, called election mail the agency's number one priority. In an agreement reached Friday in a similar New York case, the agency agreed to handle it as first-class mail whenever possible and to put more resources toward the effort. Lawyers for the agency insist that new Postmaster General Louis DeJoy never ordered a slowdown or ban on overtime work by Postal Service employees. However, they did concede in court last week that local managers may have interpreted the guidance from Washington that way. Because of that lack of clarity, Judge McHugh said a national injunction that echoes 3 others issued this month was necessary. According to data obtained this month by the Associated Press through the Freedom of Information Act, while service began rebounding toward the end of the summer, no Postal Service region was meeting the agency's target of delivering more than 95% of first-class mail within 5 days. The 2020 census count has been extended until October 31st after a court ruling reversed the Trump administration's decision to end the national survey at the end of this month. Nadia Ramlagan reports.
Census workers across North Carolina say the extra month will help ensure hard-to-reach households are accounted for. The state's self-response rate lags behind the national average. At the NC Counts Coalition, Darrell Johnson says rushing the census tally would mean losing much-needed federal dollars.
We need more time to count our communities. A lot of communities that haven't been accurately counted or fully counted are black and brown communities in rural parts of the state. So we're very excited, very pleased about the decision, but we're keeping in the forefront of our mind that this can change at any moment.
That's because the U.S. Department of Justice says it's appealing the California court's preliminary injunction. In the meantime, people can fill out their census forms online at my2020census.gov or by phone at 844-330-2020. If households still have the paper form, it can also be filled out and placed in the mail with no postage required. Johnson says the lowest responding areas are heavily concentrated in western North Carolina, the Sandhills region, and in the Northeast. He points out these regions tend to be parts of the state where residents lack internet access and where field operations were suspended due to the coronavirus.
So there's still roughly over 1 million and so individuals that have not been counted in the state of North Carolina.
Johnson says he wants people to know much is at stake. The state will lose around $16,000 over the next 10 years for every person missed in the census count.
Funding over the next 10 years, and the funding for a lot of the programs we use every single day is based off a very simple population count that's done every 10 years. So we're talking about health care and education from kindergarten all the way through college.
North Carolina receives around $16 billion annually in federal funding based on census data. For Public News Service, I'm Nadia Ramlagan.
The Bureau of Land Management began the week without a director. Reporter Mark Richardson has the reason why.
In a win for conservation groups in a number of western states, including Utah, a federal judge ordered that William Perry Penley be removed from his post, that he's been on the job illegally for more than 400 days without a Senate confirmation. Penley was nominated in June to permanently lead the BLM, but his name was withdrawn in August. Aaron Weiss with the Center for Western Priorities says not only did Penley's tenure exceed the statutory limit, but he named himself to the interim job, which also wasn't legal.
The judge spent a lot of time in his ruling going over just how absurd these series of succession orders were, signed by Secretary Bernhardt and signed by William Perry Penley himself in his acting capacity, making that acting capacity permanent.
The court's finding is the result of a lawsuit brought by Montana Governor Steve Bullock. The agency says Penley will immediately step down pending an appeal. There's no word yet on who might be his successor. In his ruling, Judge Brian Morris gave Montana's governor 10 days to submit a list of specific actions to be set aside. Weiss points out that while the ruling applies only to Montana, its impact could be far-reaching.
The immediate effect is going to be to overturn 2 specific resource management plans in Montana. My question is going to be the long-term effect, because if other governors or conservation groups point to this ruling and say, well, if it's illegal in Montana, it's illegal everywhere else.
Penley was controversial from his first day on the job. He'd been an oil and gas industry attorney, publicly doubted climate change, and headed a conservative foundation that called for the elimination of all public lands. For Public News Service, I'm Mark Richardson.
California Governor Gavin Newsom has signed legislation aimed at holding accountable the private profit-making companies that run detention centers where undocumented immigrants are held. The legislation by Oakland Assemblymember Rob Bonta is the first of its kind in the nation. KPFA's Daniel Whitty reports.
Governor Gavin Newsom signed Assemblymember Rob Bonta's AB 3228 into law over the weekend. Bonta says under the new legislation, any facility contracted with the state or federal government must follow certain procedures. And if they violate those procedures, inmates will have the right to sue that facility. Bonta says the private prison industry has been known to operate unsafe and unsanitary facilities.
We have reports that indicate that in one facility, the staff attempted to force detainees to sign a legal waiver before they were provided with protective masks, and that if they protested these coercive tactics, the detainees would be pepper sprayed. So that's the kind of thing that happens inside these facilities. Another kind of thing that happens inside these facilities is non-consensual hysterectomies that we've seen in Georgia.
Bonta cited reports that inmates are often held in overcrowded conditions at these facilities. He said this can put inmates at risk for COVID-19. GEO, which is the largest private prison company, lobbied against the bill at the Secretary of State's office, but there was no formal opposition to the bill in its final form. Bonta says this bill builds on last year's AB 32, which banned the operation of private prisons and detention centers in California. However, under the new law, current contracts must still be honored. That means AB 3228 will only tighten up safety standards at facilities now under contract until those contracts expire. Jackie Gonzalez is with the Immigrant Defense Advocates Project. She says because of the pandemic, the state legislature was only able to get through 25% of the legislation it normally handles each year. She says it's a good thing this bill made it through, especially during this pandemic year.
This year, regrettably, we earned the title of at one point having the largest COVID-19 outbreak in privately operated facilities in the state. Shortly thereafter, we mourned the loss of Mr. Carlos Mejia, wholly avoidable death of the first individual to die in ICE custody in the nation. That happened in California. That didn't happen in Texas at the border. It didn't happen in Georgia. It happened right here at home. And so that is why this
Gonzalez says more than 90% of immigrant detainees in California are held in privately operated facilities. For KPFA News, I'm Daniel Whitty.
California Governor Gavin Newsom has signed a trio of bills advancing the rights of the state's Native Americans. Democratic Assembly member James Ramos authored all three. He's the state's first Native American Assembly member. One of the new laws will strengthen the process for repatriating Native American remains and artifacts still held by state institutions, such as the University of California system, including UC Berkeley. Another sets up an advisory task force to recommend strategies for increasing Native American voter participation. And the third new law authorizes state funding and other measures to address missing and murdered Native American women and girls. We're nearing the end of the newscast. We are not nearing our goal of $2,500 in pledges for this fund drive here at KPFA. 1-800-439-5732 if you can help us out here in the final 4 minutes, or online at kpfa.org. Consider making a sustaining contribution, which means that you pledge a certain amount each month. It's kind of like giving on the installment plan. You tie your contribution to your bank account or to your credit card or to your debit card. So a $5 a month contribution becomes $60 for KPFA, and it gives us a stable amount of income each month, which in a fly-by-night organization like KPFA, or can I say a skinflint organization like KPFA, it does wonders, that steady flow of income. 1-800-439-5732 or online at kpfa.org. A long way to go towards our financial goal for this news hour. 3 minutes left in the news hour. We still got some news to bring you. Fighting between Armenian and Azerbaijani forces over the disputed separatist region of Nagorno-Karabakh continued this morning after erupting the day before with dozens of deaths reported. The European Union urged both sides to halt the fighting and return to the negotiating table, following similar calls by Iran, Russia, France, and the United States. Julia Chapman reports.
Nagorno-Karabakh is a part of the world where claims are hard to verify. Internationally recognized as Azerbaijani territory, the region is administered by ethnic Armenians, who make up most of the population. On Sunday, violence erupted, leading to the worst clashes Nagorno-Karabakh has seen in years. Armenia says Azerbaijan carried out air and artillery attacks, leading it to shoot down Azerbaijani helicopters and drones, as well as destroying tanks. Azerbaijan says it was responding to Armenian shelling. At least 2 civilians have been killed. Azerbaijan, Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh itself have all declared martial law and mobilized their militaries. Julia Chapman, Moscow.
A curfew is being lifted in Louisville, Kentucky, where many people have been arrested for refusing to stop their nighttime protests after a grand jury's decision not to charge officers in the fatal shooting of Breonna Taylor in her home. Louisville Mayor Greg Fisher said in a statement he decided to allow the curfew to expire as of 6:30 this morning. Meanwhile, a state lawmaker says she'll propose changing Kentucky's legal definition of rioting after Democratic State Representative Attica Scott was charged with a felony rioting count while participating in Louisville protests for racial justice. Taylor was shot multiple times March 13th when police entered her home while executing a no-knock warrant. Partly cloudy around the San Francisco Bay tomorrow with highs in the upper 70s. Continued hot inland under sunny skies. Highs there in the upper 90s. In the central San Joaquin Valley tomorrow, sunny with a high of 100 degrees. And in most of the KPFA listening area, there is a red flag fire warning still in effect in Los Angeles. Tomorrow, sunny with highs in the upper 90s. That's it for the news tonight for this Monday, September 28th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Mark Miracle. Good evening.
Tune in Monday nights, starting at 7 p.m. with Africa Today, a weekly program providing information and analysis about Africa and the African diaspora, hosted by Walter Turner. At 8 p.m., it's a soul sonic rhapsody of word, sound, and power on transitions on traditions, hosted and produced by Greg Bridges. Then at 10 p.m., eclectic beats and rhythms take you into Tuesday with Off the Beaten Path, featuring weekly rotating hosts. That's Monday nights on 94.1 FM, KPFA, and kpfa.org.
You're listening to 94.1 KPFA, 89.3 KPFB in Berkeley, 88.1 KFCF in Fresno, 97.5 K248BR in Santa Cruz, and online worldwide at kpfa.org.
The following program